Well, good morning, and thank you for joining the Light Board meeting a bit late this morning. We had a little confusion over links in the agenda, but we are ready to go at 7:42. First usual business, the upcoming meetings. We've had a change in staff. Jason is going to be in an interim role, and I didn't want to put the burden of weekly light board meetings upon him. So we have a light board meeting that was scheduled for next week that I would like to cancel. And this is just to reduce this burden on staff as everybody adjusts to the new structure. And so we will meet on February 14th. I think that's Valentine's Day or the day before, the day after Valentine's Day, and as our next meeting, and then followed by we're going to do two meetings in February. We do have a public forum scheduled for the 28th. I am not sure that we are ready for that. I want to get staff's opinion on that meeting. If we're canceling the next meeting and our following meeting is the 14th of February, Laura, do you feel that this public forum has got enough of an outline that we could pull this together for the 28th, or should we bump it to a later date?
I'd like to defer that decision to Jason.
Okay. Jason, your thoughts?
So I've only talked to Laura so far, and there's a couple other people I'd like to talk to. So it's hard for me to make a decision right now, but later this week, I think I'll have an answer for you. So I think maybe we could continue to target that date, and then we'll know at the end of the week whether that's feasible. And if not, as I think you talked about, maybe we just have a regular light board meeting and then we pick a better date if that doesn't work for staff.
Okay, that sounds like a good plan, and look for an update at our February 14th meeting. Warren, do we have any minutes to review? I didn't see any.
No, we do not have any minutes. Hopefully we'll have next time around. One thing I would also suggest is that we delete the meeting invites we have for upcoming meetings, and because of the wrong link in it, and send out new ones.
Yep, I'll do that for everyone.
I'm gonna write a quick note. All right. Well, it's not directly on the agenda, but I would like to give a little chair's update about Dave. We have not met since Dave gave his notice, and we were going to have a nice farewell for him last week, but then weather delayed our meeting. So, and Dave had said that he may or may not join us today to say farewell. But I do want to express my appreciation for his many years of service and for his just vast institutional knowledge about Concord Light and the reliability, the services that he brought. It was very valued. So without him here, I feel like I'm not able to really express it directly to him. So I just wanted to say that in a meeting. But if he does join us later, I may go on about that later. So next on the agenda,
when his last day is, or
his last day was Friday.
Oh, it was Friday. Oh,
yeah, okay. And our meeting was supposed to be on the Wednesday prior, but weather bumped that meeting. The light plant was busy with, restoration of power and things like that.
Okay.
And on that note, if you have not noticed, Jason will be taking the interim role, and I will let him kind of explain that in his director's update as well. and which we're going to move to right now. So Jason, please take it away.
Thank you. So first, again, I had on my list too to thank Dave for his 29 years of service to the town and to the light plant. Dave has been here for a long time and seen the light plant grow and evolve over the last 3 decades. And we had a nice send-off last week with a lot of people in attendance from the public, from the board. So thank you everyone who sent their well wishes or attended that. It was quite special, and I know he's going to do a great job in Wellesley, so we wish him the best there. As Brian mentioned, town manager Carrie LaFleur has appointed me as the interim light plant director, and we're working on a transition plan. I've been starting to meet with staff, and we'll continue throughout this week. And then met with Brian yesterday, and would love to meet with all the board members individually. And then we're trying to schedule a tour of a substation or something we can kind of let people see what we're doing here. I'm really excited to do that work and also continue the goals that the public has for the light plant, and work on improving reliability and decarbonizing and increase our self-reliance. So I'm just really excited with the things that are in the works and what the team has been doing. And I've been steeping in this environment for 3 years now, but it's really the team that's here on this call and working in this building that come here every day with their level of professionalism and just knock it out of the park. So they're the rock stars, and I'll defer to their knowledge and their history here. And I can't promise to answer all the questions on day one, but I can certainly find answers for anything that people need. So I did want to thank the operations staff, including Joe and the line crew and the engineers, for their support during the recent storms. We've lost a lot of trees and had some pretty challenging situations, and they've done a great job keeping safe and also restoring power in a timely manner and providing updates. So I really appreciate that. They give up their personal time, their family time to be here, sleeping at the light plant on the floor or out in the field in really bad conditions. And so I have deep appreciation for those folks and what they do. Wanted to just give an update on the advanced metering project, or the AMS project. We've got over 700 smart meters deployed, and we're in the process of adding some outside electricians to expedite that process. We have 2 teams getting ready, and I think the first team is going to start this week or next week. So that will help us so that our line crew can focus on their job and not spend as much time doing installations, but I'm glad to see that moving. For energy management updates, as I think was mentioned last meeting, Abode got out of the heat pump coaching business, and so we were forced to scramble. Jan Assetti and Pamela have done a great job spinning up sort of that entire business in-house. And we've got 2 new limited status part-time employees, Kim Slack and Ethan Herberman, who are now again on our staff part-time, and they'll continue to assist us and the residents here to properly size their heat pumps and navigate them through the web of rebates and tax credits. We've also been able to bring in-house the reliability or the rebate eligibility reviews that were previously handled by Abode. If people are interested in the heat pump program, you can go to concordcleancomfort.org for more information. In the power supply world, we did make our second quarterly purchase of Massachusetts Class 1 RECs last week, and prices were close to the cap. And I did see that Carrie has signed the paperwork on that. We also finalized contracts from Hydro Quebec, which, as you remember, was a 5-year power supply agreement for energy and certificates representing clean existing generation. So power did begin flowing in January of this year, and this was the 3rd power supply contract executed in 2023. There were 2 other, let's see, the other 2 were for wind energy and for Maine. So then I have broadband updates, but I think, Brian, maybe I'll hold off on those and just say, to finish the director's update, that I'm really excited to, move into this chapter and work on a transition plan while we look for a permanent director, and am available for anybody who has questions, whether public or board member. So I think I'll pause here and ask Brian if you want to see if there's questions on the director's update before we go into broadband.
Yeah, I don't see any. Alice, do you have a question you want to ask? Okay, so I So normally, Dave provides a written update. I understand that you've been on the job for days, and so a written update would be a bit much to ask. But thank you for that update. 700 installs on the AMS system. I know that the early installs, we found some things like arcing and sockets at customers' houses, and they had to do some electrical work as we replaced the meters. And David talked about the creation of some operating procedures around those scenarios so that as we roll out and scale up the rollout, we have standard ways of addressing those issues. How do you have any knowledge of how those 700 installs have gone, how rare those kind of difficult installs are, and how many are easy at this
That's
point?
funny. That was my exact question to Joe last week, was to just get a sense, because every time there's an issue, we hear about it in great detail. And it's kind of like the news, right? When you watch the news and you see these accidents or things that happen, and it makes you think that they're happening all the time, but they really are a rare occurrence. Far less than 5% of the meters have had issues. And we are trying to categorize those into different buckets. And then, as you said, develop some SOPs on how we handle those different situations. But I think right now the numbers have been so low that we've been able to really work with individual customers to make sure that we resolve these issues. And I think the hard part is that, because there's not so many, they are all individual, and we have to kind of make a determination, because our goal is to obviously keep power on, but when we take the meter off, if we find something really unsafe, we have to leave the power off until that problem's been fixed. So we're trying to give some people more advanced notice, especially sometimes before you even take it off, you might be able to tell that there's going to be a problem. So we're trying to improve that process, but it is a rare occurrence so far.
It's good to know. And the original plan was to kind of work on an area around one of the gateways. So kind of pilot a section of town. Is that where the 700 are, or are we starting to expand beyond that area?
My understanding is that we definitely did do that. We started in this pilot area near a gateway, and we are always making sure that the meters check in. So you'll remember the meters all talk to each other and to gateways, so they don't have to all be within a cluster right around the gateway, because every new meter install, enlarges the area that we can install another meter and still have connectivity. So nothing is an island so far, but the more meters we install, the bigger the available area of installations becomes. So they are getting further away from that first pilot for sure.
And the gateways themselves, the actual infrastructure to get it from wireless to broadband, is that, I think there was 14 of those to be installed around town. How is that portion
Oh,
going?
we did that. Yeah, that's been complete for a long time. That was really kind of a prerequisite before we even had received all the meters. The fiber technicians and Dale and the broadband team worked with Joe and his team to get all those mounted. And we'd had a demo box from Eaton a long time ago. And so we've been able to understand and create procedures on setting those up and deploying the ONTs inside and getting everything weatherproof. The new design is much, much better than the old smart grid design that we had. Everything's enclosed and weather safe. So it made it a bit of a challenge engineering everything to fit in there and in a way that we could service it and make sense of it. But the team did a great job getting those out. So those are all done. The relays and the gateways are all deployed.
Excellent. I want to, if you don't mind, I want to ask Carol,
Of course.
have you had any of these customer meters integrate the integration between the billing system and the meters? I know that there was a 3-month delay as the two companies figured out how to communicate software. How is that going with those 700 customers today? Is it going smoothly?
Yes, knock on wood, it's going very, very smoothly, and we haven't really run into any issues once we kind of got the two vendors coordinated. So we've had several billing cycles now, and all the new meters are billing fine, knock on wood.
Okay, good. It's about all we can ask for.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to make another comment about thank you to Dave for when Abode said that they were going to stop the MLP program, he recognized the value it brought to town, and decided to do that in-house hiring, and thank you for continuing that transition to get them all set up. That is my questions from the electrical update. Does anyone else have questions for Jason? Yes, Alice.
I'm actually not sure if it's a question for Jason yet.
Okay.
My recollection is that there was a position that was provided, a new position that was added to CMLP for last year that hadn't been filled. Did we just decide to fill that with these 2 part-time heat coaches? Is that what we're saying, or did we just lose a position that was supposed to be additive to the team?
I can tell you that the 2 part-time heat coaches that I just mentioned, the heat pump coaches, are to replace a service that was provided by a contractor, and so those were not part of what we discussed before as a new position. So though that did not morph into something else, that just when Abode went away, we took the money we were giving to Abode and we're using that for these part-time employees, and then the rebates and the processing and the software to support all that process. So that was kind of a swap of, we're sending it to a contractor, now we're just managing that in-house, but it did not impact any other positions.
That's great. But we still have an FCE to fill.
Right. Any other questions? Seeing none, I think we can go on to the broadband update.
Great, thank you. I'll take my hat off and put on a different one.
Thank
So
you,
the team did a great job in December with 17 new installs, which is a lot in a very cold month. So I appreciate their work on that. We continue to recruit for the network engineer position. We did get close with a candidate. We have some people looking from a couple states away, looking to relocate, and unfortunately, one of those situations fell through. But we previously engaged the services of an outside recruiter who's on the state bid list to work with municipalities. And before we had some issues with that, but we've re-engaged and come up with a new criteria that we're looking for, and we've already seen 2 promising candidates. So I'm hopeful that turns out to be positive and results in a hire. We've also been focusing on updating our financial models. So these models were developed back when broadband was just an idea, and they were used to sort of justify the project of the borrowing and what we were trying to accomplish. And it turned out that they were good models because what they predicted happened. But as when you actually have live data, if you feed those back into the model, you can adjust it, and then the model becomes more accurate. So we've been taking those models and working with an outside party to update them and make them as accurate as possible. And we're going to use that data to come up with capital plans to expand into underserved areas or areas that have challenges or barriers to installation, like requiring conduit, or just there's a few areas where we just don't have service to some MDUs or some parcels that our smart grid didn't go by. So hopefully with that data, that will allow us to justify some of the capital improvements that we want to do. Broadband business is operating very well in terms of the revenue versus the expenses that we have. And then the last update I wanted to say is that we purchased a new OTDR, and this is like a vital piece of equipment that tells us a lot about the information that travels on a fiber, tells us where fiber is broken or where there might be issues. And the new devices, which this is a very new model, can be used on live fiber. So before it had to be a broken fiber or something that was cut, and you could diagnose where there was an issue. This one can actually be used on live fiber that's transmitting customer data without impacting anything. So if you suspect that there's an issue, you need to measure the distance or the signal's strength, you can do all that on there. It arrived the same day that we actually had a fiber break for one of our core fibers that brought service from one of our substations to another. Luckily, we had a redundant fiber, so there was no issue to impact on customers, but it was one of those really, really cold, windy, wet days, and our splice case froze, and that caused one of our splices to break. And so this device that arrived literally on that day was able to diagnose exactly where the issue was to the foot. We found the splice case very quickly, and the technicians were able to repair that and no impact to customers. So that was something that with our old equipment would have taken a lot longer. The estimate of location would have been to the hundreds of feet. So there might have been dozens of splice cases to check. So it was just a win to get that piece of equipment in time to make that repair. So I thank the team for working on things like that and making recommendations to make sure they have the equipment they need to keep the infrastructure stable and reliable. So that's all I have for the broadband updates.
That's great. I don't have any questions. Does anyone else on the board have questions about the broadband update? Seeing none, we are catching up on our schedule. So, so next on our agenda is an idea of a new program for solar customers. So I'll explain this to the board. So and I'm going to defer to Laura if she wishes. The solar owners that went into the SREC program many years ago had their SREC opt-in term is for 10 years. After that point, they are not able to, they don't no longer mint SRECs. They mint mass class 1 renewable energy credits, the same things that we use to reduce our emissions from what we buy from the grid that is emitting. Those customers really aren't able to sell those mass class 1 because they generate so few, and an aggregator can't see really profitability in the commission they receive from selling those minted certificates. So the idea would be to create a program where customers of these older solar arrays could donate to Concord Light their certificates. This would reduce the number of certificates that we have to buy. And the question in front of the board is, how would you like to structure such a program? Do you feel it's worth our time doing that? And if so, how would you ideally like it structured? Because at the end of this discussion, we're going to ask staff to review the wishes and see if they're actually implementable and doable. So I kind of rambled there for a bit. Laura, do you want to help clarify what I'm explaining? Or do you think I kind of covered it?
Well, maybe we could figure that out, Brian, if we kind of ask people, you know, if they understood it or if they have any questions, might be a better way to go about it.
Okay. Bianca.
Yeah, so is there a reason why we wouldn't want to pay something for these class 1 RECs?
So for example, I have donated my certificates to Concord Light without any expectation of credit or payment. But I don't think the average customer would do that. Rather, they would just either stop reporting their production, or they would keep minting in an automated way, and no one would retire those certificates. So, and I don't feel that there's not really a competitive market for customers to actually make money on these, because there's such low volume, difficult to trade, costing about $20 to trade one of these, and their value is about $10 to $40. So not always profitable. I feel that the customers have to see some kind of financial value to establish this donation, or this providing the RECs to Concord Light. I think Concord Light can set a price lower than what they're paying for buying them on the market. But those are my thoughts. In order for us to really get people to do this, and there are questions about actually implementing this program, which we can get to in a bit. But I want to get the questions of should we have a program like this, and should we value those recs? Does that
Yeah,
answer?
that answered my question. Yeah, and I absolutely think we should have a program like this, and that's why I was digging into the details. But yes.
Okay, and Alice, your thoughts?
Uh, okay, this is going to be quite naive in my approach, so maybe you
Sure.
guys can all help me understand. We do have solar at our house.
Yes.
I don't know what a rec looks like that I would be retired. When I tried to retire our recs early on, because I thought I want my greenhouse gas emissions to be counted, or the reduction of, it was impossible to sell them for all the reasons that you've said. Nobody wanted to take my few recs and put them in, bundle them to sell. So I don't know what a rec looks like that we'd be giving to you. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know how that works in the MLP. Is it actually a transaction, or is it just an accounting
It's
of those recs?
it's kind of an
I'm
account.
sorry to be dumb on this one.
No, this is a good thing to explain. So every residential solar array has an account with the AnyPool GIS system, which is a New England wide system that tracks every megawatt hour generated in New England. And it tracks that by having reporting come into it. So when you report your production, or when your inverter reports automatically production, it goes to Mass CEC's website. That goes into this GIS system. And when you reach 1,000 kilowatt hours, one rec is minted. Now, if you're in the SREC program, an SREC is minted, and that has a value of 300 to 200, somewhere hundreds of dollars. These mass class 1 recs are much lower value, and when you get to that 10-year point, you stop making SRECs and you start making recs. What that looks like is a line in a spreadsheet. So you have a certificate number, and that's in the GIS system, and that goes from your account to an aggregator. That aggregator is kind of like a broker. They can trade it with different utilities, and eventually a utility will buy it and mark it in that system as retired. And when it's marked as retired, that's when you do the carbon accounting that says this utility has retired these certificates. Because of the low value, what happens is it doesn't go to the aggregator, and it just sits there and accumulates more and more certificates. If we provide a program like this to Concord residents, Concord Light's account could be their aggregator. So when you mint a rec, it would then move to Concord Light's account automatically. And then quarterly, Concord Light could retire those recs and certificates, reducing the number that they would have to buy on the market with E&E. So that's the mechanism of how it works. You don't have a paper certificate to wave around and say, this is my green power. And it is an accounting tool. We'll talk in our third agenda item about the rec policy and how recs work for a utility to say, we're providing this much clean energy. But this would be a way to collect local certificates created by the solar arrays in town.
So it's basically an accounting,
Yeah.
an accounting process that I say, sure, take my recs, and it moves
Right.
from one account to another.
And
there's value, there's enough recs collected in Concord by residents to make it of value to the light plant?
Possibly. Right now, and also I should add that people who are installing solar today, there is no SREC program, so they are automatically minting recs. So they don't have that SREC incentive. So there's older arrays 2013, we're getting around the time of the solar challenge is getting to be at 10 years old. So we're going to have that 170 residential customers stop receiving SRECs and start receiving RECs. Do we want to do the accounting to make sure that we retire them in Concord Lights account so that we don't have to go buy RECs from other places? We haven't talked about how to value that, but I would think that the value for those would be lower than that we're buying on a quarterly basis. Did I cover all of the answers you needed on
Yeah.
that? Okay. Warren, your thoughts? Ooh, I think you muted.
Sorry. Yeah. Two things. How much work would this be for the light plant? And I do think if we do it, we should compensate folks to some extent, but we should take into account the fact that there's greater transaction costs for the light plant for these RECs than for RECs we're buying on the wholesale market, so that we should be paying a lower price for them and in a simpler payment system for folks. But is it going to be worth the effort?
So, Laura, do you want to take that?
Sure, I just want to put this in some perspective. So if we assume that the average solar owner, and it varies widely, but let's just say the average is 8 kilowatt system, they're producing about 9,000 kilowatt hours a year, or 9 megawatt hours. If you multiply that by all 300 customers, you're talking about approximately 3,000 RECs, when we need to buy or retire 170,000 a year. So just to give you a sense of the, scale that this residential program could yield in terms of RECs that we could retire, you're talking about 3,000 versus the need for 170. Secondly, while I think no one at the light plant is opposed to providing value to the residents, because CMLP is, not having to buy those 3,000 on the open market, for which it's saving money, why shouldn't the customer receive some of that? The problem is that while Brian, to his credit, has kind of worked out an accounting process with E&E to get the RECs into CMLP's account from his account, that second step to compensate the customer, we've discussed it internally, and it's going to be very difficult, and there's almost 100% probability it's going to be a manual process, because the place where the volume is recorded, that to give the customer value, you need to give a price times a volume. How much volume goes to each customer? Well, that volume comes from a different system, right? It comes from the NEPOOL GIS system. Somebody's going to have to go in there for each customer, pull out the appropriate volume, and by hand assign it to their CMLP account. And that's going to have to be done continually, because they'll be continually minting these RECs. And, many of you who have been on the board for some time are aware that we don't have a high batting average with manual processes. They're difficult and lots of problems. And so when we look at the scale of this 3,000 versus 170, and how much difficulty and work it's going to be to actually appropriately compensate the customers, I guess my feeling is, we could formalize the program that Brian did to give them up to the utility if you want to, but that extra step of compensating the customer, while in theory, I agree with, we don't see how in practice we can really effectuate that cleanly and well.
And I'll go to you in a second, Warren, but it's a good separation of this discussion. One is the account setup. We do know that process. There is some questions about actually marking things as retired, because E&E does that for today, but we want to figure out that process. But the setup of the account is doable, but it does require a lot of hand holding to get it going. But once it's going, it's just automated. Laura is correct that the compensation part based on minted recs is actually difficult, and it would probably end up being a very time-consuming task for staff. I haven't talked to Dave, Laura, or Jason about this, but we've always talked about, if a rec is minted, what should the value be to the customer? What credit number should that be associated with? What if we were to change that to be, once you've set up an account that does this, we estimate the number of recs that would be minted in a year, and an annual rebate is given based on that number. So if we decide that each rec would be worth $10, and you have an 8 kilowatt system that's going to mint 9 a year, well, annually you get a $90 credit. And we go through the math to make sure that that was administratively easy, and it may lose some accuracy. So for example, if someone's system breaks and stops producing recs and they get their annual rebate, well, we didn't actually get the recs, but we paid them. So there will be some kind of mechanism that we'll have to verify these are coming in, but it wouldn't require, as they are retired, that we're giving this credit to this particular account. That may administratively be easier, but again, I'm spitballing this idea on the spot. So I want to get staff to think about that and come back to us. I see a lot of great discussion coming. So Warren.
Yeah, I wonder about making it even simpler, to just not worrying about how many recs a particular system is providing. And if you opt into this system, each year you get a $50 credit, and everybody gets the same thing, and not worry about the small variations in system size. But my question for Laura is, leaving aside the issue of the payments for the customers, is it worth it to the light plant for the accounting to get those 3,000 recs a year, assuming you had a simple system for how people are compensated?
Carol, feel free to chime in here. I mean, so here's one of the issues, Warren. Brian sort of trailblazed a process to get his recs from his account over to CMLP's account. E&E is in the middle, and E&E did this for us. And when Brian asked early on, could we roll this out to multiple customers? I posed the question to E&E, how tough is it for you guys to do this? Are you willing to do it for many customers? If we had 300 customers, are you going to push back on us, even though you agreed to do it for one? And I asked them to give me a punch list of exactly what was involved on their end. And I was unable to get that information out of them. This was over a year ago. I asked for this repeatedly. I elevated it to Dave and said, I need to get this information out of E&E, and I'm not able to get it directly. So can you get it? And, he said he would, but it never happened. So I'm kind of caught in the middle of E&E says they'll do it, and then it's not that much work on our part. But if we start giving them 10, 20, 100 of these things, is their answer going to change? Because they are doing the lion's share of the account setup and the actual transfer process. So I'm unable to really answer your question with the level of certainty that I'd like to, Warren.
And I know you've asked repeatedly. We need an answer. So how can we, Jason, do you feel you could help in getting E&E to answer Laura's question?
Absolutely. Yep.
All right. Warren, do you feel that's a good?
Yeah.
Okay. So Bianca, your thoughts?
I was going to ask, so Laura had said that the accounting for, the payments and so forth would be manual process. Am I understanding then that it's going to be a manual process for E&E just to calculate how many recs there are to be transferred, or is it automatic for them?
So they have to go into sort of each account to set it up. But
Well, once it's set up,
once
it's,
it's set up, then the recs will flow.
okay. Okay, yeah, I think I think it's a terrific idea, and I think, it just on principles basis, we want to incentivize solar build out. Right now, obviously, we can't even afford more, right? We're reaching max capacity, but we want to create more incentives for that. And I think if nothing else, I mean, it just feels, I'll just, my 2 cents of it, if I have the solar, we have a solar array, but if we were to do this again, or if we were to expand, it's just nice to know that there is something being transferred to CMLP, and that that you're receiving something, it just on a very basic level, it's just the right thing to do.
Great. John, your thoughts?
Yeah, my thoughts were very similar to what you were proposing, Brian, and as Warren kind of took it even further, is just, I feel like there's a framework here that can be administratively simple to administer. And this obviously assumes that that E&E is able to do this in a way that is workable from the light plant's perspective. I think that at the end of the day is going to be the ultimate consideration in terms of what's the underlying level of effort there. Bianca makes a good point in terms of this is the right thing to do. I think it's also, warrants some consideration that essentially, if these RECs aren't conveyed to the light plant, then they're in effect, retired. No one is able to access them. So the environmental benefits of them are, from my perspective, would be realized. It's just that CMLP can't claim credit for them. So I think under that situation, under those circumstances, the owner of the solar array would be effectively, making a, environmental contribution for which they're not compensated. Just some thoughts.
All right, so I want to summarize what I feel the board is saying, which is we would like a program like this to be stood up. We would like to get from E&E answers to Laura's questions so that we can understand better the onboarding process for customers. And thirdly, the compensation would be more administratively easy to be done as some kind of annual rebate, the value of which I will let staff review the existing arrays in town and look at some kind of let's this again, I'm spitballing here, but about a $10 rec value, which is about 1/4 of the maximum value that those are selling at currently. So if the average array is 8 kilowatts, then and they're minting 9 a year, then maybe an annual rebate of $90 makes sense for anyone independent of the size of their array. But that I would like to have some analysis done by Laura and Carol to kind of come back and say this is an appropriate rebate based on the arrays that are in town. Warren, you have a thought?
Yeah, I was just going to say, in terms of setting that price, we should take into the consideration the fact that the town's going to have higher transaction costs, and that should lead to a lower rec price than if we were buying the recs from some commercial array.
Yeah.
Why the higher transaction costs? I'm confused on that.
It's the account setup. It really,
That's just the setup, right? The one-time
yes.
setup, Andy?
Yeah. So the one-time setup is uh, it takes a bit more, but once it's set up, it is super easy to administer. So there isn't an ongoing cost there. Whereas working with E&E, we pay E&E to go out and procure recs for us. So there is some kind of expense ongoing with them to do that. And Laura, what is the relative price? I know Jason in his update said that we just bought recs for the quarter. What is the transaction price per rec when we go out and buy these?
Around 3.8 to 3.9 cents in the last 6 months.
Okay, so about $38 a rec, roughly. And so if we were to stand up a program that valued recs at about $10, we're saving $28 per rec, and that should cover the additional cost of administering any of this program. Do you feel that's an accurate statement?
I think what would be appropriate would be to do some more analysis on this, Brian, get with Carol and her team, figure out exactly what's going to be required, because they'll have to do an initial setup when we confirm that someone is set up to retire their recs, then someone's going to have to go into that account and set up that annual payment, at least the first time, right?
Mhm.
So there's a little bit of manual processing going on in addition to what E&E is doing. So I think it would be helpful, get with Carol, let's put some, estimated numbers on that and come back with, a transaction cost rather than just kind of do it by feel right now.
And do you feel you understand where the board is on what kind of program we'd hope to have stood up?
Yeah, I mean, I think what you've all expressed is for ease of administration, let's not be super accurate. Let's, using science and analysis, determine what is the average system size, how many recs do they produce, and do an average that everybody would receive. So people with small systems would get more than they really produced, and people with large systems would get fewer. Is that
Excellent.
accurate?
I believe so, yeah.
Okay.
All right. Any final questions on this topic from the board? Pamela, I will come to you in public comments because we are running a bit behind because of a snafu at the beginning. All right, going on to the next topic, which is the solar and storage policy for systems above 50 kilowatts. Jason, would you like Laura to take this?
Yes, please. Thank you.
Great.
As I think all of you are aware at this point, the CMLP system is running up against barriers to accepting additional solar because some of our circuits don't have enough load on them to absorb the solar production during certain hours of the day. It's not a uniform situation. Certain sections of town can accept more solar than others. But in order to be fair and equitable to all customers, we decided that we needed a policy for anyone wanting to install more than 50 kilowatts. So this exempts the vast majority of residential installations where people are putting in 8, 9, 10, 12, 15 kilowatt systems are not subject to this policy. It's only if you're looking to install more than 50 kilowatts that you would need to also install a corresponding amount of battery storage for any increment over 50. So if you want to install 75 kilowatts, you would have to have battery storage for 25 kilowatts. This way, everybody gets to put some solar on the system, but we can't accept such large systems that we start running into that barrier. So this was a way we felt was fair and equitable to all customers, regardless of where they're located on the system, because some sections don't cost us anything to take more solar, but is it fair to say to those customers, oh yeah, you can put solar over here, but you can't put it on this other side of town? I mean, it's a joint system that everybody pays for. It should be, I think, the same policy for all the customers. So this requirement is spelled out in pretty good detail on our solar webpage. If you go to our CMLP website, you can see this policy articulated. And that was the origin of it and why we structured it the way we did.
I didn't know it was on the website. Can you give me the title of that page? Because I did look through the website for it and I didn't see.
Sure. If we go to, sorry, I didn't have this already up. Keep talking while I'm looking for it, please.
Oh, so policy acknowledgement. Okay, so John, you have a question.
Yeah, Laura, just wondering, so you're talking about every kilowatt beyond 50 kilowatts has to be matched on a capacity basis for energy storage. Do we specify how many hours of storage need to be beyond that?
4.
Okay, thank you.
I think, Laura, I have found the commercial 2023 net metering policy acknowledgement.
It is in there, and it should be in the residential one too.
Yeah, I do see also a residential 2023
Yeah.
posted in December. So
What I'm looking at says May, but I don't know where, maybe we're at different versions posted at different places on the website.
Would you share the link when you find it? Because I'm not finding it.
yeah, I think
Yeah, let me see if I can figure out how to do that, Alice.
Okay, thanks. Solar net meeting credit, I see.
Do I put it on the whiteboard?
so.
Okay.
We have turned off the chat function, which is where you would normally post the link, and that is to make minutes easier to administer. I am at the solar rebate webpage, and I can share that if you wish. This is new. I haven't seen the whiteboard in Zoom before.
Yeah, it looks like a Harry Potter map.
I can't imagine what could go wrong here. Another option too is if Laura, if you send me the link, I can make a nice short link to it. So like concordma.gov/solar info or something, and then that way everybody can get to it pretty easily. So if you send me the link, I'll do that while everyone's talking, and then Brian, if you're okay, I'll chime in with tell people what that is.
I
Great.
just sent that to you, Jason.
So I was able to find the document that kind of goes through commercial and residential, their PDFs. But I also found that on the solar panels page, which is about the solar rebates, line item number 4 says for large scale systems, CMLP may require pairing storage. 1, if prior solar capacity at the site is under 50 kilowatts or more solar is added, battery capacity must be paired with any solar capacity in excess of 50 kilowatts AC. Battery capacity must be capable of storing 4 hours of electricity production by any capacity excess of 50 kilowatts at its peak solar electricity production potential. So we do have this. So the reason that we have it on the agenda is for the board to be reacquainted with this solar policy and to inquire about, is this appropriately set? I know we have about 4 times the residential solar compared to commercial. And my concern is this 50 kilowatts harming commercial potential. For example, I know Fenn was interested at one point of installing a 157 kilowatt solar system and was told that there would need to be storage. Now, I know the utility said there needed to be storage, but if they were given an easement, that they would provide the storage at that time. I don't know if that's still the policy. But that system, I don't believe, went forward. and it was the financial burden of adding the storage. And in my view, CMLP has installed with Kearsarge two very large utility scale arrays, which kind of ate up the bandwidth for this for uncontrolled solar in town. And if we were to do a large utility scale storage project at one of those two locations, this requirement could be eased. I want to talk about that thought, because do we want to put this burden on for the long-term vision, or do we not, on the end customer? Any thoughts about that question? John?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of issues here to unpack, and I mean, I think they warrant further discussion. I'm not convinced we're going to get to the bottom of them today. I mean, one of the questions I have, Laura, is with respect to the storage, is who controls the dispatch of the storage resource? Presumably, it's going to be the customer, and if it's the customer, it isn't.
No,
Okay,
and it says on the website that CMLP must be able to control the times of battery charging and discharging.
okay, all right, that's great, that's great.
So, I mean, I think it's helpful to think about this in terms of timing. Like, there's ultimately where we want to get to, where we want to make it easy for people to install solar, right, and cost effective. But then there's also where we are right now. Without a policy like this, if the Fenn school came in for 157 and someone else came in for, another 125, you could easily see how we could start having operational problems on certain circuits, if those were on the particularly, solar saturated sides. And so until we get to a place where we have utility scale battery storage, or more importantly, remember, the sequence of this is going to be, we're doing the metering domain before we do utility scale battery, because the metering domain is it's essentially a battery. Okay. It allows us to flow up to 5 megawatts backwards. That's going to be far cheaper than installing our own battery on the system. So, but until we have that equipment in place, until we have the pushback option truly physically available, we have to manage the system in the meantime. And how do we make a policy that's fair to everybody, that doesn't put us in a position where the town goes black? There's kind of a timing and a sequence to this.
Can everybody see the link I'm sharing?
Yes.
Thank
So
you.
that will bring you right to the policy that Laura was referring to.
And so thank you, Laura. I understand your thought process on that. Alice, your thoughts?
Unmuted, I can't see it right now.
Okay, I can hear you.
Okay. So my general thought is, I understand why we would want to require battery storage at residential locations and for the dispersion of the stuff on our network. But it seems to me, I'm talking without much background on this, it would seem like we would have a greater impact if we were to install storage at our large arrays at the landfill and over by Maynard line, that we could have a much greater impact, and it's only managing the batteries from two different locations as opposed to a disparate 100% or 140 locations through town. That it seems to me that if we want to get the bang for our buck in terms of energy storage, that we would want to do it at the large and commercial size facilities and not at the small house size, by general sense. I could be totally off in my thinking, but it seems like if what we're trying to do is maximize the amount of dispatchable energy through storage capacities, with individual batteries, I think that doing it through the commercial sites makes much more sense to me.
Warren,
I agree with John that this is something worthy of further conversation and not an off-the-cuff discussion.
yes, I agree. Warren.
Yeah, I agree too that this warrants further discussion. But I guess from Laura's last comments, I was trying to understand to what extent is this a temporary issue or a long-term issue? If our ability to sell power out, to ship power out of Concord back into the system is going to be resolved in a relatively near-term time frame. How would things change then? And would we still need the same policy at that point? Because if we wouldn't need this policy, then let's just live with it the way it is now and change it in a year or whenever that is.
Yeah, well, let me pause before I go on to Bianca and ask, I'm not sure if Jason is ready for this, but maybe others can support him. The metering domain is a project we're hoping to accomplish. What is the status of that effort?
I don't know the answer. Laura, do you know?
I think Joe would be the best person to respond to this if you're open to it, Joe.
Yes, so we're continuing to work with a vendor, SEL. They that's the people that basically make all the relays and controls that we have around town. And we're working on a larger SCADA project. Part of that SCADA project, we have asked them to give us the provisions to push back or become a metering domain. We're basically in the final stages of setting our specification with them. This has been sort of ongoing for a better part of a year anyway, but we're closing in on that. As we get to that, when we finish up the spec, we'll kick that around, make sure everything makes sense, and then we should be putting that out to bid. But then as far as actually when a PO is cut and all that, you know, everything's been signed off, we will we're looking at 9 to 12 months before we can take any of the materials we actually get here, the new relays and things that we need to install. So you're probably looking at definitely over a year, but my guess would be early 25.
At the earliest. So metering domain is not something that's happening in 2024. It's definitely going out to 2025. Yeah, that's a ways away. I mean, the around that time, we're going to be doing our first solar and storage project at the middle school. I'm sure that will take a lot of your time for engineering to verify that's done right. I know that you've already done a lot of that work. Okay. Alice, you have additional? No, okay. So what I, you know, it seems in the short term, a policy like this is needed. But in the long term, once the metering domain is set up or we get some utility scale energy storage, it is not moot, but maybe less relevant. And what happens in solar installations is you get a moment with customers. Each customer kind of has a moment where they're ready to move and install solar. And if we aren't ready, then the customer makes a decision and that decision kind of finalizes the project. So we have two policies, one for commercial, one for residential. What if we were to change the 50 kilowatt cap in the commercial rate to be higher, and then with the residential making that more residential scaled? So I don't know if 50 makes sense or maybe something a little lower. But could staff, Jason, take a look at those policies and right size them for the rate schedule? So I'm thinking G2 and G3 might need more a higher mark to reach the requirement of batteries. But a G1 or a R1 would could keep the 50 kilowatts or potentially maybe even lower.
Can do that.
If your staff could kind of do some analysis around that, I appreciate it. I do want this to be something that meets our temporary needs for managing the distribution system. I don't want someone coming in, putting in a megawatt solar array behind the meter, and suddenly we have to deny them an interconnect for a policy they didn't understand. I want them to understand it ahead of time before they get to that point of building that project. Warren?
I also think we need to let customers know that this policy could change. If I was a commercial enterprise and I wanted to put in a 500 kilowatt system, and I was told I had to put in all this storage, and so I say yes, and I put it in, and then I find out that that policy goes away 6 months later, and if I had just waited to install my system, wouldn't have had to put in the storage. I would have thought I should have been given a heads up that the policy might change because of engineering efforts the town's taking.
Yeah, so I'm looking at that solar panels, solar rebate webpage that talks about this policy in a short, it's item 4 with 3 sub bullets. I think adding a 4th sub bullet saying, some statement that, Concord Light is willing to work with you if this is burdensome. Reach out to us if the addition of storage is making the project difficult to execute.
But Brian, why don't we just call it like an interim policy or a transition policy? We can't do that?
No, I'm hesitant to do that. Labeling something interim immediately has people saying, "Oh, I'll wait," and it leads people towards inaction.
Okay.
I would rather people see that we'd like to have storage if it's a larger array, but contact the light plant to get into the details before you walk away and say, "Oh, I need to do storage. That's not going to work for me."
Yeah.
Laura, does that make sense on that webpage to add something that says, talk to us?
Well, the concern I would have with that, Brian, is if, so let's say somebody calls up and says, yeah, I want to put in, 100 kilowatts and it's burdensome, well, it would be for everyone to add storage because the storage is expensive. Do I treat them differently? And how many can I do at 100 versus people who were limited at 50? Like, we have to think about equitable treatment, so I kind of hate to say, well, give us a call, we'll see what kind of deal we can work out, because it doesn't sound like, people are all going to be treated the same.
Yeah.
Good
That's
point.
a very good point. Yeah. Oh, well, let's if we could do some analysis, see if the commercial 50 kilowatts could be raised, and if so, what? Kind of review this policy and come back to us with changes that you feel would help promote solar installations, but manage that temporary need for storage, as well as we really should get the metering domain set up or get some energy storage. The next topic, I did a write-up, and we have a lot of uncontrolled solar in town, and really we have got to get to either the metering domain or battery storage to kind of start to add any more solar. Bianca, your thoughts?
Yeah, so I wanted to just get a timeline for things. So I think what we were discussing, the metering domain, that's the smart meter that would be smart meter installations that lead us to be able to deploy time of use. Is that correct?
No, no, metering domain is re-engineering the substations such that it can flow backwards.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so we can have when Concord's solar production exceeds Concord's demand for electricity, right now that would create a blackout with town because of the safety systems that don't allow reverse flow at the substation. So the metering domain has the engineering component, but it also has the agreement with Eversource to receive that power.
And that's for 5 megawatts?
It has the legal ease has a limit of 5 megawatts.
Okay, and that's a legal limit, not a structural limit.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. And then, so that gets completed probably beginning of, let's say, let's call it January 2025. Joe, is that correct?
We hope to start putting things in.
Let's
We actually have to retrofit 2 substations.
let's think summer or fall.
Yeah, you're probably looking at summer or fall before the whole thing's done.
Summer or fall of 2025?
Yes.
Yeah. So
Okay.
year and a half away.
Okay.
John, your thoughts?
I guess one piece of information from my perspective that would really help with all this discussion is getting a better sense in terms of what's the effective cost of solar to the light plant. And I realize it's going to vary from customer to customer, but I just feel like having some understanding of that would be helpful so that we can compare it versus other clean energy resources that are available to the light plant. So I don't know if I'm assuming that that's something that's doable, and Jason and Laura would be able to undertake that.
Well, these are behind the meter systems. So it's not us procuring solar in town. It is customers deciding to put solar arrays on their structures under the net metering policy. So I don't think the effective
would be-
cost is really it's on the customer to decide if it's of value.
But depending in terms of how they're being compensated for that, I would think that there's an effective cost to the system.
But I mean, John, you're talking about trying to figure out how we could tell people don't put up a solar array. I mean, that's
No, but
not.
it's up to us to determine, how in fact they're compensated for the energy that they avoid, right?
Well, that's the net metering policy, and that's in place.
Yes.
But this
And
is a policy of requiring batteries if your system gets larger.
But the net metering, within the net metering policy, there's effectively a cost that the light plant pays, or that, energy or revenues that the light plant doesn't realize. So I just feel like an informed opinion regarding how that stacks up relative to other alternatives will help us in terms of making these decisions in terms of, okay, should there be a requirement for energy storage? I just feel like it's part of a broader perspective in terms of what's the effective cost of this resource.
I mean,
within
I
the revenue
think
storage.
we already know the answer without having to send staff to do any homework. I mean, obviously, when customers put up solar panels, that takes away revenue from the light plant. But we're not here to maximize revenue. This is a town that is very focused on green energy, and we all want to have our own independence. So to tell a customer that, or make it difficult, or create net metering policies that, right now, I think the net metering policy that we have is probably one of the least attractive compared to other areas.
Yeah, so in net metering for the residential customers, there is a fixed monthly distribution fee that seeks to collect those collect distribution expenses that normally would be collected should that customer not have solar. In the commercial rate, they're paying distribution on the variable for every kilowatt received from Concord Light. So that's how that distribution is collected. So if you produce a kilowatt on your roof and you consume it, then that is some lost revenue of the variable. But if you produce it and then you send it to the utility and you take it back within the billing period, you pay the variable distribution in that, as well as your standard monthly meter fee. So there are mechanisms to collect for those costs in the existing policies. That kind of opens it up to very broad solar discussion, whereas I think what I'm trying to focus on is the policy around the requirement for energy storage. At what point do we feel we need to put the burden of energy storage onto a system because the system has become unusually large? So I understand your question, and it's a good one for the cost of service study, but not necessarily for setting the storage requirement. That's my opinion. But if you feel differently, we can continue to explore it.
No, and just to be clear, to respond to Bianca's comment, I'm 100%. I feel like Concord should be, its electricity supply should be all clean energy. The question is, what's the appropriate composition of that electricity supply, and what's the appropriate role of solar versus other resources? That's really the question I'm trying to answer here, and I feel like it's a critical one for the light plant to address. And I think as part of that, it's an understanding in terms of what are the price signals that we're sending through the net metering policy, and that's really what I'm trying to better understand here.
Yeah.
I agree with John 100%. I mean, I do think the board absolutely has to address the net metering policy. And to disagree with Bianca, we have probably the most generous net metering policy of any utility in the United States. It's a complete dinosaur.
No, that's not
No-
true.
Oh, yes,
I
it
put the
is.
solar panels on home, and I did the
Okay.
home.
Other utilities
So
have gone, Brian, I know you don't want me to say this, but I
Go
want
ahead.
to be known to the board that most other utilities, all the ones in California, Hawaii, North Carolina, they've all ditched net metering because they've recognized that it's a wealth transfer from those who cannot afford to put in their own solar to those who put in solar. And so our net metering policy is a dinosaur, and you guys absolutely should address it. I know many of you are solar owners and you're opposed to it, but it is, it's vital, and it's about rate fairness.
Okay, so I don't want our discussion to become one of net metering. Laura, we had agreed to kind of not continue to work on the legacy rates so we could focus on the time of use rate. So when we talk about net metering, it should be under that structure. So we can have that discussion later on, but I see us diverting from the question of should the customer get a burden of putting energy storage to one of how do we fairly compensate for solar, which I know is a quagmire. So we will have those discussions, but I would like to do it in context of a cost of service study and our time of use discussions and have it forward looking. All right. So the question in front of us was to review the existing policy on 50 kilowatts and the requirement to co-locate storage. How does the board feel? Do we feel that we need to do some work on this policy? Do we feel we want to accept it as is? I think my thoughts are because metering domain and any kind of large scale storage project is a year plus away, that we do have to have this kind of policy. I think the commercial is set too low for any commercial project to happen. would like to hear from staff in a future meeting about how we might be able to better manage that for the commercial side. I think it is fine for residents to have a 50 cap where storage is now required. Ideally, the utility would put in large scale storage and remove this need. But is that a fair summary of our conversation, or would anyone else like to remind me of some other discussion points we'd like to follow up on? Warren.
Yeah, Brian, I'm not sure I completely agree with you on this.
Okay.
Only because 2025 doesn't seem so far away to me. And there are so many issues for us to address. I'm not sure this is one that deserves that much time and attention.
All right.
Maybe other folks have different views.
Do we feel we need to work on this policy? Alice, your thoughts? Oh, I think you're muted. All right, there we go.
I don't have an opinion yet. I just saw that memo this morning, and I need to cogitate a bit.
Okay. John, do you feel we need to continue to work on this given all of the different efforts?
I think I'm more aligned with Warren. I'm not convinced that this is, critical and time sensitive.
All right. Bianca, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think if this were I think my overall concern is that for us to make decisions is so slow. And I think that I'm pretty sure we're behind on a few, on several items that had been commitments that we'd made for 2025. We don't have the next target, past 2025. If this were a quick decision, or maybe if you just come up with like a proposal that we can, take a vote on, yes. But then if I think, if we're waiting, as long as we can stick to the plan, that this metering domain comes into place next summer and fall, I think, this year and a half is potentially an unfortunate loss of time for people that are looking to put in larger solar arrays, but maybe we should focus on, pushing forward.
Okay. I would say, oh, I got an echo. All right. So I would say that I would ask staff if a commercial customer is approaching you about this policy, and it's constraining their ability to move forward on solar, that it be brought back to the board. But it sounds like the board is going to focus on other priorities currently. Does that sound like a good conclusion to this discussion? A quick thumbs up from. Okay. All right. With that, I'm going to move on to. We are at just about our time to finish, and I wanted at least acknowledge our next topic, and we can come back to it because we are running late. So 9:06. So the next topic on the agenda is the renewable energy credit policy. When this came to the board previously, it was requested that we add more context to the policy, more explanations for future board members to understand not just what we do, but why we do it and how it works. based on my notes, I did do a write-up. I had thought I had done this weeks ago and sent it out. It turned out I didn't. And so I did it this week and got it out late last night. It is, I shared it with the board, and if anyone would like to receive it, that's on the meeting, I can forward it to you. But I'm going to share my screen real quick. Oop, I need permission to share.
I'm on it.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Let me get the right one. So I think for today, I'm going to do a quick walkthrough of the document, and I will take feedback via email from the board, and we can come back to review. So the purpose of this document is how are we going to, or how have we been accomplishing the directive given to us by town meeting in Article 51 in 2017, which is called Concord's energy goals. And this directs CMLP to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions of its power supply portfolio and to offset any residual greenhouse gases in the electricity supply through the purchase of RECs or other offsets. And so I do a quick introduction about where we began. So 30% in the town's greenhouse gas inventory, 30% of the community's greenhouse gas emissions were from the production of electricity. And that equated to about 73,000 metric tons every year. The Mass DEP retail sellers report of electricity is how we can measure in a fair way our emissions as a utility. And this is published, unfortunately, 2 years in the rears, because it's published, like they haven't even published the 2021 year emissions for utilities. So we do have to rely on our submissions to this and the estimates that we can provide on the website so that customers can know this year we did this, or last year we did this many emissions. But I want to acknowledge the progress we've made, because you can see here the first years of reporting in 2012, 2013, Concord Light was only about 3.5% non-emitting. This was mostly the NYPA contract and the hydro. You can see here that we had stopped selling our RECs to other utilities, and we first started purchasing unbundled RECs in 2018, and you can see the big jump getting to 56.7% non-emitting. In recent years, that has had another jump where we are 84%, 95%, and in 2023, we finally reached a full non-emitting power supply portfolio as directed to happen by 2030. So 7 years ahead of schedule, it was accomplished. Now, these are estimates by the light plant, and so we have to wait for the retail sellers report for final acknowledgement. This gives us a bit of the history on how we transitioned, starting with a penny in rates in 2018 or late 2018, and then got up to 2 cents in rates in the recent year. And we use those to buy without we buy those RECs without a compliance obligation. So Concord Light is not required under the renewable standards portfolio to have a certain percentage of non-emitting renewable or clean energy. We do have the GGSE, but that is we're well ahead of the benchmarks that is proposing. But by us purchasing these certificates and retiring them, that increases the price of them, creates more potential in the market for more development of these kinds of resources in New England, because the utilities maintain a compliance obligation. They are at about 22 to 25% right now. So they have to find these or they pay a penalty rate. The next we go on to, I've taken the chart from the power supply portfolio page, and I explain how the purchase of unbundled RECs is the policy we're talking about, but that is very much dictated by our ability to sign non-emitting PPAs. The more non-emitting PPAs where we buy the bundled certificates with the non-emitting generation, the less we have to buy unbundled RECs, and that affects rates. We can't do 100%. We have an energy mix which has the more expensive renewables, which we desire to support, but it also has nuclear in there as a lower cost option that's non-emitting. And you can read more detail. I'm trying to go quickly. I talk here about how we can't be a single fuel source or a single supplier for the majority of our portfolio. This adds risk should that supplier and South Hadley is very dependent on Seabrook, and when Seabrook closes, they will have a few years where they're very exposed to the day-ahead market, and they will have to be signing contracts once they get notice that Seabrook is going to close. And that'll be a struggle for them for a few years. It also talks about how the spot market can be in line with PPA pricing relatively, but once the unexpected happens, for example, the Ukraine war, prices can go up very quickly as we put in our PCA at that 5 cents because of that market and our exposure to it. Here I talk about, let me see. So this talks about how do we estimate how much we need to buy for RECs under this policy. So when we have, for example, we take an average sales year, and these are not exact numbers, these are rough numbers. But if we're selling about 170 million kilowatt hours on an annual basis, and 38% of our portfolio does not have bundled non-emitting, then we need to buy offsets for that 38%. So this is the number of kilowatt hours. If we use the highest price of a REC, well, then we have a target of what we need to collect in rates. And so today, we're collecting 2 cents, which equates to about $3.38 million. So I expect that we're going to overcollect in 2024, and that will have to go back to ratepayers using the power cost adjustments, where we provide those excess collection back to them. Now, that's the narrative that I've added, and I know you have not had time to review this, but if you do get the chance, please email feedback and thoughts, and if I've missed things, we can add them to this document. If I think I've gone on too long about certain topics, I can remove them. But I do want this to be a document we can point to say, this is what we're doing, this is why we're doing it, this is how we manage the portfolio to a non-emitting status. here is what Laura provided in the first policy. I don't see any issue with this. It just, the board had requested more context, and I hope that I've provided that. So, John.
Brian, just a quick question. In the table, the percent emitting, what's the basis for that? Is that basically kind of the unhedged volumes?
Yeah, so here you can you see my cursor?
Yep.
So here's that 38% for 2024. Here's the 21. Oh, yeah, I did use 21. So the 21, the 15, the 13, and the 12. So we have non-emitting contracts where the bundled certificate and rec are together. And if any of this math is wrong, I welcome a correction. For example, I don't know exactly where solar fits in. I know that we have solar that has SRECs that we sell, and then we buy class 1 RECs to replace them. I'm not sure how that function fits in, but I would like to know. But this shows how the more, the less agreed upon contracts, the more we have to rely on unbundled RECs. The more that we have contracted, the less we have to rely on that. So if we're collecting 2 cents today, and this estimate that I've done estimates a penny and a half, could probably do it. And then so in the future, we may see that our contracting has allowed us to reduce this particular component of the average energy charge. I'm going to try to wrap up the meeting because we are running over and I do see people leaving. So I would like any first thoughts from the board on this. Is this what you hoped from our discussion previous, to get more context on this effort? I got a thumbs up from Warren, I think. Well, let me do this. I'm gonna let the board review this and email directly to me their comments or edits, and we will come back to this with an up or down vote on an almost complete final document. Does that sound like a next step? I got shaking heads. All right, and some thumbs up. All right. With that, I am going to stop sharing. And I would like to entertain liaison and public comments. Pamela, you had your hand up earlier, so feel free to ask your question.
Pamela 13 Concord Green. I agree with Bianca that, in fact, I know people who have much better solar remuneration, such that the clean energy generators are not being punished for it because they're not paying distribution costs of the grid like people who have to buy their power from elsewhere. I think we need to subsidize that because we want to get to completely generated, distributed virtual power plants run by software like the internet is run, such that we don't have to have, well, the green future is bright, like Laura said. We have to find a way we can economically get there that doesn't incentivize doing the wrong thing instead of the right thing. We need to incentivize residential solar. There should be no inhibitions for people to put it in. If we have to buy batteries for residential people, we should do that. I'm not a solar owner. I'm a condo owner, but we need to subsidize and incentivize residential solar plus batteries. We need to incentivize that too. The last thing we should do is punish them by extra meter fees and we need to do a better job of laying out where we want to get to, how to get there. If
Okay.
if do the meters, the new meters that we're installing, are they capable of doing everything that's needed
Yes.
to hook up to a virtual power plant?
So virtual
Power
power plants don't necessarily work through the meter, but yes, they do have the communication technology. They do have bi-directional metering, and so forth. So we made that investment thinking of that kind of scenario. Thank you. Any other public comments? Seeing none, I'd like to entertain a motion to adjourn.
I
Could-
move we adjourn.
Oh, one quick question.
Yes.
When we're buying RECs, it doesn't turn our purchase green. It's a market incentive. You can't magically turn the power green just by buying RECs. And it is only an effective incentive insofar as it actually makes the green commercial power increase.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, I had a section about in-town solar in this document that I shared, but I removed it because it was getting quite long and it wasn't focused on the directive. But yes, you're right. We do need to cite more solar here, but certificates
And
are.
we also need to take advantage of the fact that we have solar, whether they're sold, whether the RECs are sold out or not. That is green and should qualify us for in the total of clean energy that we produce here.
Okay, thank you, Pamela. John, you have a thought?
No, it's just an FYI, I won't be unavailable on February 14th.
Okay, thank you. All right, I had a motion from Warren to adjourn. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a second from John. Bianca? And Alice? Great. Warren
Yes.
and John.
Yes.
And I agree as well. Thank you all very much, and I will see you on February 14th.